Hello, on this lecture we're going to send the data to the database. And here's a little graphic of how the data is going to travel. So the data is going to come from the client, and then it goes to the web server, and then from the web server it goes to the database server. In your case, the web server is inside Visual Studio, and the database server is also installed on your laptop. So everything here is contained inside your laptop. On the previous assignment, we had the index view, and the index view used the model to send some data to the controller, and then the controller used the same model to send data to a second page. Now we're gonna get the model right here on the controller, and we're gonna send this model to a DAO class, and the DAO class is gonna send the data to the database. So DAO stands for Database Access Layer. So this class I wrote for you. When you downloaded the Visual Studio project, you only got this class here. So in order for us to do this work, we need to enable the configuration. The configuration is already enabled for you, but if you create a project from zero, you'd have to do this constructor right here on your controller in order to be able to access the configuration. I already did this for you. Now we need to take a look on the DAO person, specifically on a method called addPerson. So the addPerson method receives a person model as a parameter and then returns a string with the person ID. Now the person ID is very important for us because the person ID is the primary key that the SQL generates for you whenever you insert a new person. So let's take a look on the database so you understand how the addPerson works behind the scenes. So here's my SQL Server Management Studio. I'm going to connect to the database. This is my server name. Yours is going to be different. I'm going to connect. Open the database. And on the tables, I have a table called person. So I'm going to right click on the table person, and I'm going to select to new query editor. And here's a simple select of what I have in the database. When I execute this query, I get nothing back because my database is empty. So I'm going to write now one query to insert data into this database. So I'm going to right click on the table again, and script, insert, and I'm going to click on new query editor. And here's the query to insert data in the database. So for the first name, I'm going to pick So this is my query. Now I'm going to run this query. So execute. And then I have one row affected. If I go back to the select one, and if I run this again, here you're going to see that I have the first name, last name, and I have a person ID here. The person ID happens to be 3. Now, if you notice, whenever I insert the person, I did not pick the person ID because the person ID is auto-generated for me. So I don't have to pick the person ID. It's a primary key that's auto-generated. And this number increases by 1 as I insert more items. So I want to insert another item here. And then I'm going to execute again. And I have one row affected. I'm going back to the select query, and I'm going to run this query again. Now I have 2 records, and now notice that the person ID has a record 4. That's for Jane. So even though I do not insert this number keeps on increasing by 1 over and over again. So if I insert one more item, it will be person number 5 now. Now this is important because this is one of the primary keys for this table, and we're very interested on this number here. When I run the insert query, I'm going to put here one more statement, and then the next time I insert something, it's going to give me the ID that I just inserted. So I'm going to insert another value. Now I'm going to run this, and when I run, it returns here the ID number 5. Now the reason it returns the ID number 5 for me when I insert this is because I'm having the select scope identity as ID, and this ID here is the primary key that I just inserted for that record. So if I run this select again, I'm going to have the Anna with person ID 5. So this is very important for me because I need this person ID so I can control when this person is logged in or not. So this ID is going to be more important on the next week's lecture. Now, before I leave here, I want to show you one more thing. So what happens if I try to insert the same data twice? So that's going to give me a problem because this database was designed in such a way that you cannot insert the same email or the same username twice. If you do that, it's going to get you an error. So I'm going to run this, and automatically it gets me an error right here. It says I cannot insert duplicate key. So I must insert always a new email and a new username. So I'm just going to put a couple of letters right here to have a new email, and a couple of letters to have a new username. And if I run this, now it's okay. I have number 7, ID number 7. Now notice that it skipped one ID. Every time I make a mistake, it skips one. So if I go back to my select again and execute, now I have one extra item right here, and the person ID number 6 is gone. It's wasted. Now let's open Visual Studio and take a look on how this is going to play on our project. So this is the project we had from last lecture. If you remember from your last assignments, you first start with the index, and the index has a form that you fill out some information, and then the action sends to the page 2 of the home controller. So you come to the page 2 of the home controller, and then this action receives a person model as a parameter and just sends the person down to the view. Now I'm going to put a stopper right here, and then I'm going to run the debugger because I want to stop right here and I want to take a look on what's on the person model. So I'm going to go to debug and start debugging. I'm going to put some information right here. It doesn't matter what I put. I'm going to click on submit, and then the stopper stops for me right here. And then if I go right here on my locals and if I expand the person model, I can see a lot of information on the person model right here. So at this point right here, I want to get this information and I want to send it to the database. So I'm going to stop the debugger. And then right here, what I want to do, I want to send the person model to the database. Now for that, we're going to use a class that I wrote for you called the DAO person. So the DAO person is right here, and there is a method that we're very interested at this point, and this method is the add person method. So these 4 steps is what I created to make it easy for people to learn how to insert data in a database. Now, you do not have to understand everything here on this method, but I am going to go over this really quick, just in case if you're curious. So I divide this in 4 steps. So step number 1 is connect to the database. This is how you do the handshake and you open the connection. So first you get the connection from the configuration file. If you remember, we set this on the previous assignment. Then you create an object and you open the connection. After that, you create a query, and this is called a parameterized query. Then you query the database, and then you get the ID back. So this is how you get the ID back. So the ID for us is very, very important. And then finally you close the connection and then you return the person ID. In other words, this method right here gets the person module, inserts this person module into the database, and then gives you back the person ID of that specific row that you just inserted in the database. So we want to use this method right here. So right here, if we want to use this method, the first thing to do is to instantiate a DAO person object. So here you're gonna instantiate a DAO person object, and then right after that you're gonna call the DAO person add person method, to insert the person model. And then once you do that, make sure you get the person ID that's retrieving. So it's gonna save into a string. And then once you have that string, and then once you get the string, you're gonna save the person ID into the session. And then once you do that, your assignment for this week is done. Alright, so that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.